Hey team, just a quick video to show you how I went about up-armouring the Oathmark Elves with the addition of a Breastplate, Eventail and a Cooter. To start off with, we'll need a cleaned up torso and legs, and the first thing we're going to do is remove the metal plate from the chest. I'm going to do that with a file. So we're going to remove the excess plastic along the line of the collar, trying to avoid damaging that if possible on both sides. We're going to want to avoid damaging the chainmail around the arms too much, because we're going to want to keep that for later. I won't waste your time watching me file too much. Let's speed this up. So you should end up with something that looks somewhat like this. Next we're going to mix up some putty and get ready to do some sculpting. The tool that I'm going to use mainly is going to be this one here. So we'll grab our putty and we'll turn it into sort of a U shape, which we can then press onto the chest of the model. Doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to be poking and prodding it around anyway. And we just start smushing it into place. So I want to start by wrapping the putty around the torso, make sure it's nice around the waist and bring it up over the shoulders. And I want to keep the centre fairly high because I want to put a ridge in the centre and really have that stick out. I need to push it down and make sure that it's tight around the waist. And again, just define that centre line. It's really just a case of pushing around the putty till you're happy. Just tidy up the edges. I'm going to want to put a sort of a roll at the bottom here. We'll press that in now. To give that really sort of defined flare out at the bottom. And it's just a case of fiddling around and pushing the putty where it needs to go to make the shapes I want. We've got quite a bit of extra putty on here that we don't need, so we're just going to take it off the top and off from around the arms and the side. And then it's just a case of refining the shape. A couple of minutes later, and we'll move on to the next step, which is to put in a stop rib at the top of the breastplate. The stop rib's a small projection that prevents blades from sliding up the breastplate and into the throat. Instead, it'll deflect them off to the side. This is easy enough to put in. All you have to do is press in a line on the bottom and then again on the top to get a raised portion. This will end up being hidden by the Eventail on this particular model, but if I was to do one with just a breastplate and no Eventail, then it adds just a little bit of detail to the breastplate. And then again, it's just a matter of further refining that shape. Alright, and the next step is we're going to add the cutouts for the arms. So on the front of the breastplate, they have a cutout on either side so that you can move your arms right forward and touch your hands together. So the way we're going to do that is we're just going to use the rounded end of the tool to make a small cutout, like so, and then we'll just flick it out. and that's the reason we tried to avoid damaging too much of the chainmail when we were filing the plate off to begin with. So we're going to do that on both sides. Just like that. And then again, it's just a case of tidying it up and refining it further. I've taken a little bit more putty out of the right side than I should have, and that's just a case of adding a little bit more in and smoothing it out to fix that. And here we are 5 or 10 minutes later. Not entirely happy with the shape, but that'll do for now. We'll put it aside to harden up a little bit and we'll start working on the Cooter. Alright, so to start the Cooter, we're going to start with a little oval of putty and we're just going to slap that on about the elbow. Make sure it's on there nicely. Then we'll grab our tool and we're just going to press down the edges. Make sure it is firmly attached. Apologies for the awful camera work. I'm not used to sculpting on underneath the camera. Right, and then we'll start pressing in the edges to give it that flare that you get in standalone Cooters. And again, it's just a matter of poking and prodding the putty around to get into the shape that you want. It's alright being fairly rough at this stage, because it all gets sorted out in the end. Anyway, we're back in a few. Eventually you'll end up with something looking something like this. So we'll put that aside to dry and we'll start working on the Aventail next. The Aventail is the bit of chainmail that hangs down from the helmet and around the lower part of the face and throat of the elf. So we'll grab our head and we'll remove the excess hair, starting with the clippers and then using a knife. The Aventail I'm looking at sculpting hangs down from the outside of the helmet rather than directly underneath, so I only have to cut the hair down until it's flush with the helmet rather than having to worry about any undercut at all. Thus. Alright, let's glue that to the torso. Here we are again, a few minutes later, once the glue's had time to set. And again, we just smoosh a whole lot of putty where we need it, and then shape it to suit. And here we are again, a few minutes later, ready to start putting the holes in to make it look like chainmail. Chainmail is one of those things that's pretty straightforward, but it does require a bit of practice to get some reasonable results out of. So yeah, I mean, all I can suggest really is practicing at it. But the basic idea is you poke a little hole and then you move the sculpting tool slightly to the side so you get kind of a wave build up, and then you continue moving across in the opposite direction from what you're pushing, so that those waves kind of build up over the previous hole, and then for each layer you go in the opposite direction, and slowly you build up the look of rings stacked on top of each other. As I say, it's just practice and trying to make sure that your holes are pretty well the same size and the same sort of spacing apart to get the best result. Eventually you should end up with something that looks like this. I've done a bit more faffing about and I've glued the arm on, so it's looking like this at the moment. Sort of narrowed up the sides of the Aventail a little bit, and the last thing we need to do is put the straps on the back for the breastplate. So I start by rolling up a bit of putty to get a nice thin strip of it. And then we're going to carefully place that on the back where we want it, thusly, and then we'll cut off the excess. It's then a case of smoothing it down and trying to make sure that it's even along its length. I probably should have done this part before I put the Aventail on, because then I could have made the Aventail over it, but I didn't, so here we are. I've just got to smooth it down a little bit to make it look like it's going underneath. It's the same thing for the other side. I won't make you sit through it, at least not in real time. And eventually we end up here. So I'll grab the other one so you can have a quick look at them together. So hopefully that's been helpful to some people. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too long, or the video didn't last too long. Anyway, thanks guys.